Callum Ashworth had not planned to bring anyone to the gala. He had planned to arrive alone, shake a few hands, write a large check with his name on it, and leave before the speeches ran too long. That was the arrangement he had made with himself on the drive over, sitting in the back of his car with his jaw set and his eyes fixed on nothing in particular outside the window. The Royal Meridian Hotel rose up ahead of them through the rain, gold light spilling from every floor, and Callum felt the familiar tightening in his chest that had nothing to do with his collar. Inside that building, the woman who had ended their engagement 7 months ago was being celebrated as the new creative director of Hartwell Industries. The company that had once been his, the partnership that Sylvie Hartwell had built on the foundation of his ideas, his late nights, and his willingness to believe in someone who had never deserved it. He had not come because he wanted to see her. He had come because powerful men do not disappear quietly, and Callum Ashworth had spent enough of his life being underestimated to know that absence is often read as defeat. The car stopped. His driver opened the door. The cameras were already waiting. "Mr. Ashworth, will you be making a statement tonight about the Hartwell restructuring?" "Callum, are you here to support Sylvie's appointment?" He didn't answer. He never did. He simply moved through the crowd the way he always had, with the particular stillness of a man who had nothing left to prove and everything left to do. It was at the base of the hotel steps, just past the edge of the red carpet and the velvet rope, where he saw her. She was standing under the narrow overhang beside the service entrance, half out of the rain, her arms wrapped around herself. Her coat was a dark navy that had seen better winters. Her hair was pulled back, damp at the edges, and she was looking down at her phone with the focused concentration of someone trying very hard not to look like they were waiting in the cold. Beside her on the ground sat a worn canvas tote bag with the strap held together by a safety pin. She was not what the evening was built for. That was obvious to everyone passing by, and most of them made it equally obvious as they moved around her without acknowledgement. A young hotel employee in a red jacket approached her. "Ma'am, this entrance is reserved for event staff and suppliers only. If you're attending the gala, you'll need to use the main." "I know." Her voice was steady. "I'm waiting for someone. I'm afraid I can't allow guests to wait here. This area. She's with me." The words left Callum's mouth. Before he had fully decided to say them, he was across the pavement in a few steps, close enough now to see her properly. She looked up. Her eyes were dark brown, slightly cautious, with the particular wariness of someone who had learned not to trust easy rescues. She was somewhere in her mid-30s, he guessed. There were lines at the corners of her eyes that came from either laughter or grief, and something in her expression suggested she was better acquainted with the second. Beside the left corner of her mouth was a small, dark freckle, the kind of detail you noticed once and then couldn't stop noticing. The hotel employee took a step back. "Of course, Mr. Ashworth, my apologies." When they were alone, she looked at him without embarrassment, but also without pretense. "You don't know me," she said. "No," Callum agreed. "So why did you?" "Are you all right?" She blinked. It was the kind of blink that happens when someone expects a performance and receives a real question instead. "I'm fine," she said automatically, then quieter. "I'm mostly fine." He looked at her for a moment. The rain was picking up. Behind him, another cluster of guests arrived in a black car, laughing about something, their coats expensive and dry. None of them looked at the woman standing in the shadow of the overhang. "Have you eaten?" he asked. Something crossed her face. She said nothing. "There's food inside," he said. "Good food. The kind they spend too much money on and then put in portions too small to enjoy." Her mouth moved. Not quite a smile. "You're describing a gala." "I'm describing a gala," he confirmed. "Come in." She looked at him with the full weight of someone who had been burned before by things that looked like kindness. "I'm not dressed for it." Callum looked at her. Then he looked at the entrance to the Royal Meridian, where a man in a silk tuxedo was laughing too loudly, and a woman in a gown that cost more than most people's monthly rent was reapplying her lipstick in the reflection of the door. "You look like someone the room hasn't seen clearly yet," he said. That landed differently than she expected. He could tell because she was quiet for a moment in a way that wasn't uncertainty. It was something closer to disbelief, the careful kind, the kind that protects you from hoping too soon. She reached down and picked up her canvas tote. "My name is Rosalind," she said. "Rosalind Vane." He extended his hand. "Callum, I know who you are." She shook it. Her grip was firm. "I used to work for you." He didn't expect that. He searched her face. "Which division?" "Product development, 3rd floor. I was a junior analyst. I left 18 months ago." She said it without accusation. "You probably never knew I existed." "I'm sorry," he said, because it was true and because it cost nothing to say it. "Don't be." She almost smiled again. "Most people don't." He offered his arm. She looked at it for a moment. This woman who had been asked to move along, who had been standing alone in the rain with a bag held together by a safety pin. Then she took it, and together they walked up the steps of the Royal Meridian Hotel. The lobby was the kind of beautiful that announces its price before you've finished walking through the door. White marble floors, arrangements of white orchids on every surface, a ceiling that seemed to be made entirely of light. The Toronto Symphony's chamber quartet played something smooth near the stairs, and everywhere Callum looked there were people he recognized, investors, board members, journalists with quiet eyes and loud ambitions, and all of them, within about 30 seconds of Callum and Rosalind entering the room together, noticed her, not because she was dressed like them. Because she wasn't. The navy coat was not a fashion choice. The worn canvas bag was not ironic. And the way she stood, chin level, shoulders set, looking around the room with neither apology nor aggression, that was not performance. That was someone who had decided somewhere along the line that dignity was the one thing she would not negotiate. Callum watched the room watch her. He had seen this kind of attention before. It was the particular scrutiny reserved for people who show up somewhere they're not expected, carrying evidence of a life the room has agreed to pretend doesn't exist. He stayed beside her. "They're staring," Rosalind said quietly. "Yes, because of me. Mostly." He steered them gently toward the main hall. "Give it 2 minutes and they'll pretend they weren't." "Will they?" "No," he admitted, "but they'll want to." Rosalind almost laughed. It was a small sound, surprised out of her, and it did something to the tension in her face that made her look suddenly more like herself, or at least more like the version of herself that existed before whatever had brought her to that service entrance door. The main hall of the Meridian Gala was enormous. Round tables in white linen, candles, more orchids, a stage at the far end where a podium waited under soft gold lighting. Callum found them seats near enough to see everything and far enough from the stage to have a quiet conversation. A server passed with champagne. Rosalind took a glass, but didn't drink from it. She set it on the table and looked at it as if she were still deciding something. "You said you used to work for me," Callum said. She nodded. "Before the company restructured, when your partnership with Sylvie Hartwell was announced, a lot of the product development team was cut. I was in the second wave." She said it matter-of-factly, no performance. "I didn't take it personally. These things happen." "Do you take it personally now?" She turned to look at him. There was a directness to her that he wasn't used to in this room. "I take 18 months of contract work personally," she said. "I take 2 industry references who stopped returning calls personally. I take standing outside an event I was supposed to be photographing tonight because my press credential mysteriously didn't clear. That I take a little personally." "Your press?" "Freelance. I photograph corporate events." She glanced around the room. "Or I was supposed to tonight. Someone at Hartwell's comms team flagged my application. I don't know who. I don't know why." She paused. "I have my suspicions." Callum said nothing. He had suspicions of his own. Across the hall, through the crowd, he found Sylvie before she found him. She was standing near the stage in a gown the color of champagne. speaking to a group of people who were giving her the particular attention that comes with a new title. Sylvie Hartwell had always known how to command a room. It was one of the things he had admired about her once, before he understood the difference between commanding a room and owning the people in it. She turned, as if she felt him looking. Their eyes met across 40 feet of gleaming space. He did not look away. Sylvie's gaze moved to Rosalind. She couldn't have placed her from that distance. Rosalind was not someone Sylvie would have remembered, but the fact of her, the obvious reality of her presence beside Callum in that specific way, that landed. Callum watched it register in Sylvie's expression, a tightening around the eyes, a recalibration. He looked back at Rosalind. "Tell me about the photographs you were going to take tonight." She looked at him sideways. "Really? I'm genuinely asking." She considered. "Corporate event photography is mostly about finding the moments people don't know they're having," she said. "Everyone's performing at events like this, but every few minutes someone forgets to. They laugh at something that catches them off guard, or they look at someone across the room and forget they're in public." She turned her glass slowly on the tablecloth. "Those are the real photographs. The rest is just documentation." Callum looked at her. "And tonight, I don't have a camera." She said it simply. "So, I'm just watching." A man appeared at Callum's shoulder. Gray-haired, compact, with the particular steadiness of someone who had been trusted by too many people over too many years to be surprised by much anymore. His name was Gordon Whitmore, and he had been Callum's mentor for the better part of a decade, one of the few people in the room whose judgment Callum genuinely trusted. "Callum." Gordon shook his hand warmly. "I was starting to think you'd changed your mind about tonight." "Almost did." Gordon's eyes moved to Rosalind with the careful attention of a man who notices things. He smiled. "And who is this?" "Rosalind Vane," she said, extending her hand before Callum could introduce her. Gordon took it, and then something happened to his expression. It was subtle, a flicker, the kind of thing most people would miss entirely. His hand stayed around hers a half-second longer than politeness required, and his eyes moved over her face with a focused attention that was not rude and not social. It was recognition, or something close to it, something trying to become recognition. Callum saw it. "Gordon?" Gordon didn't answer immediately. He was looking at Rosalind with an expression Callum had never seen on him before. Something between certainty and grief. He lowered his champagne glass. "Forgive me," he said carefully. "Vane, is that your married name?" Rosalind looked at him. "No, I've never been married. It's my name. And your mother's name." She went very still. "Why do you ask?" Gordon's voice was quieter now. "What was her first name?" The table around them had gone slightly quieter too, as though the air had noticed something shifting. Rosalind set down her glass. "Her name was Eleanor. She passed away when I was 11. Her voice didn't waver, but it cost her something. There was a fire in our house in Westmount. I don't talk about it much." Gordon's hand moved to the back of a chair. He held it. "Gordon." Callum stepped slightly closer, his voice low. "What is it?" Gordon looked at Rosalind. When he spoke, his voice had the particular quiet of a man who has been holding something for a very long time and has suddenly found the right place to set it down. "I knew Eleanor Vane," he said, 30 years ago. She was one of the most gifted structural designers I ever worked with. We collaborated on 2 projects in Montreal before she moved to Westmount to raise her family. He paused. "When we heard about the fire, when we heard she was gone, we tried to find out what had happened to her daughter." His eyes filled. "We were told there was no daughter, that she had been alone in the house." Rosalind was very still. "I was at my aunt's," she said slowly. "I wasn't home that night. We didn't know that. No one knew that." Her voice was barely audible. "My aunt wasn't. She wasn't close to my mother's professional circle. She just took me in. She didn't know who to call." Gordon set down his glass on the table and turned to face her fully. "Your mother was one of 4 partners in an architectural collective she co-founded. When she died, her share of the intellectual property from that collective, 3 decades of design work, patents, licensing income went into a trust, registered in the name of her daughter. His voice steadied. That trust has been sitting untouched for 23 years, Rosalind, because no one could find the daughter. The silence that followed was not empty. It was the kind of silence that has weight. Rosalind looked at him, then at Callum, then back at Gordon. I'm saying we've been looking for you. Gordon's voice broke on the last word, just slightly, just enough to be real. Your mother wanted you protected. She built something and she left it for you. And somehow, it's been waiting this whole time. Rosalind sat down, not dramatically, not because her legs gave way. She simply sat down, the way someone does when the ground has shifted and they need a moment to take account of where they are now. Her hand found the edge of the table and held it. Callum crouched beside her. Are you all right? She looked at him. Her eyes were bright. I don't know yet. He nodded. That's a reasonable answer, she exhaled. Then she looked at her hands on the table and then at the room full of people who had been watching her all evening with varying degrees of pity and curiosity and disdain. None of them knew. None of them had any idea. And Rosalind, who had stood in the rain outside a service entrance because someone had decided she didn't belong inside, had just become someone the room had profoundly, catastrophically misjudged. That was when Sylvie arrived. She moved toward their table with the precision of a woman who has decided exactly how she wants a conversation to go before it begins. Her gown caught the light beautifully. She had always been good at that. Callum, she said warmly, as if they were acquaintances at a pleasant mutual event. I didn't expect you to actually come. You sent the invitation. I did. Her smile was the practiced kind. I suppose I thought it might be too much for you. Given everything, he looked at her calmly. It isn't. Sylvie's gaze dropped to Rosalind, who had stood up. The two women looked at each other. Rosalind was about 4 inches shorter and was wearing a coat she'd had since 2019. Sylvie was in a gown that had been fitted twice and probably cost more than Rosalind's monthly rent. There was no competition in the conventional sense, and yet something about the way Rosalind stood made Sylvie's composure perform slightly harder. I don't believe we've met, Sylvie said. We haven't, Rosalind said, but I photographed one of your launch events in 2022, the Hartwell Spring Collection reveal at the Fairmont. She said it pleasantly. I submitted 47 images that were used in the campaign. I was paid a flat fee and not credited. The air around the table changed. Sylvie's expression held. I wouldn't know the specifics of that arrangement. No, Rosalind said. I imagine not. Sylvie turned back to Callum. It's a lovely evening. I hope you'll stay for the speeches. Her tone had cooled by exactly 1 degree. It means a great deal to me that the people who helped build Hartwell are here to see where it's arrived. Callum looked at her for a moment. Then, you didn't build Hartwell with help, Sylvie. You built it with other people's work. There's a difference. He said it without heat. That was what made it land. I didn't understand that while it was happening. I do now. Sylvie's smile stayed on her face. It had nowhere else to go. Rosalind spoke then. Her voice was quiet and unhurried. You flagged my press credential tonight, she said. I don't know if you remembered me from the Fairmont job or if someone recognized my name on the list. But you made sure I couldn't work tonight. She tilted her head slightly. That's all right. You didn't need to. I was already going to be here. Sylvie stared at her. I have no idea what you're. It's fine, Rosalind said, and she genuinely seemed to mean it. I'm not angry. I think I understand something tonight that I didn't understand before I walked in. Sylvie turned and left. Not in a dramatic way, in the particular way of someone who needs to be elsewhere immediately and has decided they're fine with that reading. Callum watched her go. He had spent 7 months carrying a wound that he'd believed was about loss. Standing there, he understood it was about something else entirely. It was about having his own judgment returned to him, the part that said who a person really was, that he had silenced for too long in favor of what he wanted to be true. He turned back to Rosalind. She was watching the room. "How are you doing?" he asked. She considered the question seriously. "Better than I was an hour ago." A pause. "Which is strange, given that an hour ago I didn't know any of this." Gordon returned with a colleague, a woman his age, a lawyer who had handled the Vane Collective Trust for 2 decades, and who turned very pale when she saw Rosalind's face, and then composed herself with considerable professionalism. They sat at a quiet corner table and spoke in low voices for 20 minutes while Callum kept a respectful distance. When Rosalind returned to him, she sat for a while without saying anything. He didn't push. He refilled her water glass and waited. "My mother's work," she said finally. "I never really knew what she'd built. She always made it sound small, like she was doing modest things." She shook her head slowly. "She wasn't doing modest things?" "No," he said. "She wanted to protect me." Her voice was steady, but only just. Even after she was gone, she made sure there was something there. She looked at her hands. "I've been careful about hoping for things, for a long time. It's safer." Callum looked at her. "I know something about that." She glanced up. The company, the engagement. He didn't hide it. Both, really. When you build things with people you trust, and then the people and the things disappear at the same time, it becomes difficult to know which one you're mourning. Rosalind was quiet for a moment. "Which were you mourning?" He thought about it honestly. "The version of myself that believed it was going to work," he said. "That's the hardest part to lose. Not what you had, who you were when you had it." She looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen from her yet. Softer, more open. The wariness still there, but held differently, less as armor, more as habit she was examining. "You came tonight to make her feel it," she said. "Didn't you? Not to punish her, just to let her see." "Yes." "Did it work?" he considered. "Something happened tonight that made me forget why I came," he said. "That probably tells you more than the answer would." Rosalind almost smiled. She turned her glass once on the tablecloth, watching the way the candlelight moved through it. The room around them had changed. Callum wasn't sure when exactly. At some point during the evening, the whispers about the woman in the navy coat had shifted. Some of the people who had stared with open skepticism were now watching with an expression they were trying to make look like it had always been polite. Callum leaned forward. "You said you were a photographer." "Am," she said. Present tense. He reached into his jacket and slid his phone across the table. "A corporate event listing. I have 3 board dinners and a product launch in the next 6 weeks," he said. "No one is managing the visual documentation. I haven't found anyone I trust with it." She looked at the phone, then at him. "You're offering me work. I'm asking if you're interested. After one evening." "I've spent an evening watching how you see things," he said simply. "That's enough." She sat with that for a moment. Then she picked up his phone and looked at the dates. Something settled in her face. Not relief exactly, but something quieter and more lasting than relief. Purpose, maybe. The particular quality of someone who had been navigating without a compass for a while and has just been handed one. "I'll think about it," she said. He nodded. "I probably won't think very long," she added. That made him smile. A real one. The kind he hadn't offered to this room all evening. Later, Gordon gave a brief unplanned address to the gala, introduced by the event host as a last addition to the evening's program. He spoke about Eleanor Vane, about what she had built and what she had meant to the people who worked alongside her, about the daughter she had spent her last years trying to protect. He did not name Rosalind until the final moment, and when he did, the room went very still. Callum was standing beside her. He felt her hand tighten briefly on his arm. He covered it with his own. The applause began slowly and then filled the hall. Sylvie Hartwell stood near the back with her champagne glass and said nothing, and clapped with the measured rhythm of someone performing participation. Rosalind did not cry during the speech. She waited until it was over, until the room had filled with conversation again, and the quartet had returned to their corner. And then she turned toward the window that looked out over the wet street and the city lights below. She stayed there for a moment, her back to the room, and Callum gave her the space to do it. When she turned back, her eyes were dry. But there was something different in her face. Something that had been held very tightly for a long time had released, slightly, just enough to breathe. "Thank you," she said. "I didn't do anything. You stopped a security guard from telling me to move along," she said. "You brought me inside. You stayed beside me." She looked at him steadily. That was enough. He looked at her. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. She considered him for a moment with that same careful directness. "Are you always like this? Like, what?" "Quiet about things that matter. Usually," he said. "Is that a problem?" "No," she said. "I think I've spent enough time around people who were loud about things that didn't." Outside, rain was still falling on King Street. Inside, the gala was wrapping into its final hour. Sylvie's speech was delivered, applauded, and would be quoted in 3 industry publications the following morning. Callum didn't listen to it. He was sitting across from Rosalind Vane at a table near the edge of the room, listening to her talk about a series of photographs she had taken one winter in Nova Scotia. A fishing village at 4 in the morning. The boat still, and the light doing something she still couldn't fully describe, and finding, somewhere between her hands moving around the story and the quiet certainty in her voice, that the tight and careful thing he had arrived with that evening had loosened considerably. He did not examine it too closely. Some things deserve the space to become what they are before you name them. He drove her home that night. She lived in a 3rd-floor apartment in Leslieville with a window she'd mentioned, offhand, that she'd specifically chosen for the morning light. She got out of the car and then turned back. "For what it's worth," she said, "I think you built something real at the company." Before. She held his gaze. That doesn't go away because someone else took credit for it. He looked at her. "Good night, Rosalind." "Good night, Callum." She went inside. He waited until the light in the 3rd-floor window came on. Then he drove home. In the months that followed, things moved forward the way real things do. Not with a rush, but with the particular steadiness of something built on ground that had been tested. Rosalind spent 3 weeks with Gordon's legal team and came out the other side, holding something she still hadn't fully learned how to carry. She started slowly. She opened a studio. Small, good light, the morning kind. She shot Callum's product launch and 3 board dinners, and the photographs were the kind that made people look at themselves and think, yes, that's closer to the truth. Callum and Rosalind saw each other often, and then more often, and then simply, always. He never announced it. Neither did she. It didn't need to be announced. It was the kind of thing that people in their lives noticed and then stopped noticing, the way you stop noticing a thing that has settled into the natural shape of the world. Sylvie Hartwell's appointment at Hartwell Industries lasted 14 months before the board restructured. The industry publications reported it with the neutral language of professional disappointment. Callum read the article and set his phone down and did not think about it again. There was a dinner sometime in their 2nd year at a small restaurant in the West End that Rosalind had photographed for a friend. They were the last table. The kitchen had gone quiet. The candles were low. "I've been thinking about Eleanor," she said. She said her mother's name more easily now. It had taken time. "I used to think about the fire as the thing that ended everything, the before and after." She turned her wine glass. But she didn't think that. She thought about after. She planned for after. A pause. "She planned for me." Callum looked at her across the table. "She was right about you." Rosalind looked up. "She never even got to see who I became." "She built the conditions for who you became," he said. "That's not nothing. That's everything." She held his gaze. And the thing that crossed her face in that moment, quiet, full, and entirely without performance, was the same thing she would later describe in a letter to Gordon on the anniversary of Eleanor's death as the feeling of being found, not because she had been searching, but because she had, against considerable evidence, refused to stop being findable. "The right love," she would write, "does not look for you in your best moments. It finds you in your most honest one. standing in the rain, holding a bag with a safety pin, choosing one more time to hold your head up, and it stays.